Welcome to the Josh Bolton Show, where we dive into interesting and inspiring conversations. And now, your host, Josh Bolton.
So, where are you at?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Arizona, okay. Must be warm over there right now, huh?
Yeah.
I'm in LA area for California.
Oh, okay, cool. Then you're in my zone. Yeah, we're. So, do I seem framed up okay and everything? Are you?
You're perfect.
I mean, I don't know. Do you actually release? Yeah, you must, because I've seen them. So you do record video too.
Yeah,
and release video
it records to the computer. I edit it up, and that's where if something comes up, I'll like tap my mic and I'll cut that out.
Perfect. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that.
You're welcome.
Because I thought we were going live. You know, it's like, what? Live? This is terrifying. Live stream.
There's no going back from that.
That's right. Now I feel much better. Now I feel like, okay, I can just have a conversation with you.
Yeah. And what I do on YouTube is I set it to a premiere so it goes live, but it's not.
Okay, perfect.
So tell me a little about yourself and what you do.
Okay, so are we starting or are we just still getting used to each other?
We're starting.
We're starting. Okay, great.
Oh, yeah, let me cover that for there. All right, we're good.
Okay, so a little bit about myself. Well, I'm a developmental psychologist and a national board certified health and wellness coach. And basically, I take an integrative approach to health and wellness, but primarily I specialize in stress management. I really sort of help people mitigate the negative effects of stress so that they can make a bigger impact without sacrificing their health, their well-being, or their personal relationships.
That's awesome. And it's Leslie Bosch?
Bosch, that's right, like the appliance.
Okay. That's awesome. So I'm actually a little curious. Can we go in a little more on the how you go with your clients, but also the stress management part?
Sure.
So, well, let's see what's in without giving too much away. Like, what is an average thing you do with your clients to see where they're at?
Well, when I start with clients, we do sort of a kind of a self-assessment, and we get a sense of where they are really in the 7 core areas of health, their level of satisfaction, the challenges that they're experiencing. And just so you know, very quickly, the 7 core areas are sleep, nutrition, movement, relationships, spirituality, which is really about purpose, and then environment, which is really about making sure you're not nature starved and that your settings, that you're working in are sort of organized. This seems to really make a difference for people's health. And then the final one, of course, is resilience. And this really is how easily you can bounce back from setbacks and adapt to stressful situations. That's
interesting. The way you structured it, I've been on a quest to figure out stuff, and that's the 7 I kind of figured out is like where you at mentally. Your diet really affects you. If you don't exercise, that really affects you, et cetera, et cetera. So that's interesting. So was that just through practice, or is it like through your studies to get to where you're at? You found that too?
Actually, what happened for me was, I started to come to the end. Like many Americans, I was working a very demanding job. I was burning the candle at both ends. At that time, I really didn't even know that stress management was a thing. So I was doing all the things, not sleeping, stress eating, feeling tense all the time, not taking time to, recuperate, downtime, feeling tense and, kind of snappy in my relationship with my husband and just really not having any fun. And I really just didn't know that there was any other way to do it. I thought this was just how you do it. So I started to look around, and that's when I found the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. And that's when I found his integrative approach. And that's when I, really had my eyes opened. And then I joined that and started to work through that and started to clean up my act in all the 7 core areas. And then I started to feel better. So that's sort of how I came to it.
Okay. So it was more like trial by fire or trial by error that you found it. Okay.
Yeah, I was really starting to get into some trouble and I needed to make some changes.
Like health trouble, work trouble?
Yeah, exactly. Health trouble. I was gaining weight My blood sugar was rising. I wasn't happy in my relationship with my husband, so there was tension there. And basically, I was just very unhappy in my life because there was no balance. It's really what we're talking about.
Okay. So then what are some of the steps that you took for your journey to get those things in balance?
Well, I definitely cleaned up my diet. The Mediterranean diet is really sort of the one diet that, there's so many ways to go about this, but the Mediterranean diet is the one that has been the most researched. So that's really about whole foods, clean foods, that type of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that made a big difference because I got rid of all the processed food. I was already pretty much exercising pretty good, but I added some other things like Pilates and stretching and some like dance moves so that I was feeling a little more coordinated. That's right. Some dance class. And then basically, I really did start to understand about the stress management and understand really that I have a mind and that it's sort of my job to run it rather than letting it run me.
That was the biggest one for me. And I was trying to figure out why the 2020 market crash was so big and everyone's freaking out. And I started this whole rabbit hole journey of learning stuff. And that's what I came to. I'm like, oh, it's how you process things. So it's, if you can keep a level head and learn to keep your emotions in check, then it's actually, you're many steps ahead of a lot of people too. I also now look at it as like, I don't want to stress because that's not good for my heart.
Exactly. That stress leads to that inflammation. And then really that inflammation is what underpins a lot of the big diseases that get us, like heart disease and diabetes and even to a certain extent, cancer. They're finding that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a doctor couple on and they were saying the same thing. They're like, cancer is one of those, it's only been recently a problem. First of all, we can see it more, but also we're more stressed than ever as a species. And this is unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, unfortunately, the environment is more polluted than ever, and this is also impacting us. But so again, it's a lot of trying to keep your environment as clean as possible, trying to remove those pollutants wherever you can.
So then in that, would it be like buy a Brita filter, filter your water, drink more kombucha? What are we talking about for that?
Well, that could be any number of things. I'm not really an expert in that, but it's all the things, like when we talk about green products and off-gassing. So it can be that sort of thing. It can be about, your air filter. It definitely can be about your water filter. It definitely can be about your food and eating organic and trying to be careful about the amount of fish. Unfortunately, even the amount of fish because of the mercury and things like that that are in the animals. So
yeah. And from what I heard, is like farm raised fish are actually higher in mercury for some reason too.
Yeah, it's crazy. So there are definitely sources that, sites out there that specialize in this, where you really can kind of better understand that, because those heavy metals can create problems for us, but we can handle some of it. It's just up to a certain point.
So then would fasting come into play with this in your practice to tell people or recommend lightly? Oh, sorry, not recommend lightly.
Well, with coaching, I'm not really a consultant, so I'm not like a doctor telling you what you should do. Of course, I am sort of informed about best practices. So I am going to encourage you to do certain things that we know that do lead to healthy outcomes. Again, I'm not really a specialist in diet. I'm not a nutritionist, that kind of thing. But primarily, we look for ways to help people make the little tweaks that they can to just keep upgrading.
Yeah. So it's like the healthier foods. Don't eat McDonald's unless you're like in dire straits of calories kind of thing.
Yeah. You definitely want to try and cut the junk foods out. I mean, obviously you can have them now and again, but they can't be a steady diet. It's really hard on your body. There's not the nutrition. Then again, your liver is working extra hard to kind of purify the toxins that are there. I mean, I'm not saying McDonald's is toxic, but you know what I'm saying? Processed foods. Again, it's not organic. They're not using grass-fed cows and that type of thing. So here again, it's just like working for that, towards that.
100%. So,
and that can be costly. So again, that can be a struggle for people, but there are ways to work it in to know which things should be organic and which things you can be okay with non-organic. But again, that's all of that is like a process over time of working that out and trying to figure out what's going to work best for you.
Right. So you mentioned a few times earlier, and I'm just curious that you had trouble with your husband. Are you still married to that husband?
Yes. Things
Okay.
I'm here to report, like things are very much better.
Okay.
Once I started to lower, because when you're operating in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, that stress mode, for me, unfortunately, my mode is like, you're either hiding out, leave me alone, or you're on the nitpicking. Why are you doing that? Da, 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 da. That kind of.
Right.
So it really is important to get out of that fight, flight, or freeze mode and get back into that more parasympathetic mode where you're more collaborative, you're more open, you're more interested, you're more, creative in the problem solving, that type of thing.
So what was the major thing that, whether it was you or just through a series of events that you realized like maybe I need to shift? Kind of thing?
Oh, definitely. I knew immediately.
Okay.
I mean, this is the thing that I love about education. And for me, certainly this happened with my PhD in family studies and human development. Immediately, I started to understand like, wow, if these are the things that people need to do in order to achieve healthy outcomes, well, I'm not doing many of these things. Exactly. I really need to clean up my act. And that was very clear. It was also quite devastating because it's a huge challenge to change, especially later in life. It's much better to get set up
Yes.
and build these habits when you're young. But nonetheless, it was, what I needed to do. And I started doing it.
So was it kind of like you tried to shift at least 1% a day or do something better that you didn't do yesterday? Or was it more just, this is a really long question, but essentially, was it small things or was it kind of like a major shift in a short amount of time?
Well, typically, change does not happen overnight. So typically, it's like little shifts, little shifts, little shifts, little shifts. And certainly you have to, research shows that it's best to take those baby steps and really work the baby steps over time. Otherwise, you can get overwhelmed and quit. So definitely want to make those little incremental shifts and substitutes just bit by bit by bit. But it's a big, especially when you're talking about transforming your mindset, it can be a really big shift.
Yeah. I used to be a super awkward, quiet kid. Like I would not be able to do this. And it just slowly through times. I'm like, okay, you're an introvert, but learn to talk to people kind of thing. You seem like those creepy guys in the corner going, so.
Perfect. I love that because basically that's kind of like possible selves. I love that. Possible selves is a really lovely theory that can help you sort of understand what can make motivation, right? So when you imagine your ideal self, right, this is the guy who can easily comfortably talk to people, right? Mm-hmm. Make them feel at ease, make them feel comfortable, excited, open up, interested, curious, warm, these kinds of things, right? And that you can do that. You can be the guy who's at ease with people and can get them to be at ease as well. Then you have the other, like you said, the scary, creepy guy in the corner. That's the feared self. Then you have your real self. So once you begin to understand the ideal and the feared, then you can locate yourself on a scale. Like when you started, you were too close to the feared self. So that motivated you to start moving towards the ideal self. And bit by bit by bit, you moved closer to the ideal and further from the feared.
Oh, yeah. And it was not an easy process. It took me a long time to get that going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing is you mentioned work for you, but also for your clients. What were you doing that burned the candle at both ends? Then what are also some of the things you see with your clients that they're doing that most don't see?
Well, I think that honestly, like just to boil it down, the biggest thing is just self-care. People just we have not, especially in America, been conditioned to care for ourselves.
Yes.
We are really conditioned to care for others and to put like everybody else's agenda first and our agenda, our needs last. And unfortunately, the world is getting so busy now that your needs just never get on. They never get on the list. They never make it.
Yeah.
You never get to that low on the list, if you know what I'm saying. You just never get around to it. And then also, especially for women, this notion that it's selfish to take care of yourself. And this is not a good belief, because we really do need to take care of ourselves first.
Oh, 100%. I same thing for me. I'm like, I can't put myself forward because that's selfish, and I need to help my family. I need to help my friend before I help myself. And it was actually one of my buddies I was helping him move. And it was like one of those, I somehow managed to book like 3 moves in a row. So like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And he even said like, when are you going to do something for yourself? And I'm like, well, good question. I don't know. So yeah, I agree. And ever since that moment, it was, and through different other events, I'm like, oh, you know what? It's okay to say no. Actually, people respect that. They're like, wow, he actually stood his ground. All right, somewhere else.
Yeah. If we can get to that point where we really can see it as an invitation or an offering, we really do have the right to say yes or no, depending on whether or not it works for us or it aligns with our goals. Because there's nothing funner than, partnering with somebody if they're doing something that you're excited about too. Right. But sometimes you just have too much on your plate. And so you being able to say, thanks so much for thinking of me, but I really just can't do it right now. Maybe I can in the future, but right now I can't.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just curious though. Let's say someone's stuck at a 9-to-5 office job, even during this COVID time, and management is essentially just running around for a chicken without a head. How would you recommend your clients cope with that stressful job?
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's starting to look like most jobs, right? I mean, I think it's just crazy, really sort of what's happening now it's been happening for a long time, but what is the norm and what people are expected to cope with. And I think COVID has made it difficult too, because again, it's just sort of like the 24/7. I think the biggest thing that we really do with this is we have to be able first to decide what's in my control and what's not. And sorting things into that's out of my control, but this is in my control. So getting the what's in my control on the list and then saying, okay, which of these things should I start with? And then begin with that and stick with that till it's done. But really, a lot of times we can then move to the next thing and then set those boundaries for the beginning and the end of the day. But this can feel really hard to do.
Really
hard to do.
And especially if you're more old school and it's like, do you always focus on the company? I guess you got a dick boss, but you got to do what's best for the company because they feed you, you feed them. Especially lately, I've noticed it too. It's like managers just treat you like a number. You're easily replaceable.
Exactly. And this is what's devastating. When we have that sense that we don't matter, that we're like, there's that whole it-thou relationship when we're just a thing, like a cog in a machine that can easily be replaced rather than a human being, a person that has certain unique, skills and brings unique things to the job and that we kind of relate to as a human being. This is really hard to cope with and creates a lot of stress for people.
It really does. And it is one of those is like the human nature. I want to do something productive. I want to give something back. And I also need some money to go buy food because I don't grow my own food anymore. So it's like, but you don't want to be treated like trash because you're at the job site. What is it? It's the same as sleeping. Like a quarter of your life is just working.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is why so frequently it's important, if you can, to try and align your work with your passions, with your purpose, with those things, with your values, somehow be a reflection of that. It makes it a little easier to engage in the activities, but not everybody can do that.
Yeah. And say, depending on their circumstances, certain opportunities now are closed. But so one thing I'm just curious about, it's just for also you, but also just what you've seen is I've noticed in general, a bit of a shift in society, like we said with the work, but it almost seems because of COVID, that in general, people are not really social as they used to be.
Ah.
I would say, I'm not trying to make it like put you in a corner. I'm just saying, is this something you're seeing too?
Yeah, a lot of people, and this makes a lot of sense if you think about it again, back to what we talked about with regard to stress management. It does feel that a lot of this ability is falling out of the picture, as it were. But if we understand that more people are threatened because of COVID, and all the impacts of COVID, right? So we can feel very threatened, just like we don't want to get it. Maybe somebody that we cared about died. Maybe we were vulnerable. We're a vulnerable individual and could die if we get it. So, I mean, there's the real threats, like the existential, but there's all the other things that are there to do, like the whole having to adapt, the whole Zoom, the loss of all the things that we love, hanging out, partying, going to events, like all these things that have changed because of COVID and because of, the attempts to deal with it effectively. People are threatened a lot. I mean, they're a lot. So there are a lot of people are operating in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so we can see a lot more of this snippiness, a lot more of this fighting, or a lot more of this retreating.
I like how you explained it. Much more elegant to me. I just say we were isolated from interaction for almost a year and a half, that we just kind of forgot what it's like to be civil, kind of thing.
I think that makes perfect sense too. Our skills are rusty.
Yeah.
And I also think, though, in some ways, they're stressed. I mean, we're all stressed. This has been going on for so long. And now that we're talking about this recession and all these people moving in their jobs and all this stuff, it's just basically creating more fear, more uncertainty, more volatility. And this is hard to cope with. I mean, again, it's stressful.
It's very stressful. Yeah. And I don't remember the exact article, but it was something like something to the effect of we're already in a recession. We might be heading for a depression. And I'm like, well, this is going to be a first in our history of the world of recorded economics. We're in a depression, but there's sky high inflation. And I was just like, man, that's going to be intense to see how that play out.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, I don't know anybody who's really excited about it.
Well, I don't think anyone is.
Yeah.
Even like the big hedge fund managers are just like, no, can we stick with recession kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you touched on it earlier. So how would someone, deal with the like here, I can metaphorically control the Zoom call, but I can't control the looming recession, depression, housing market crash. How would you explain to someone to not worry about those big scary monsters that are out there?
Yeah, this is really what it is. Like we talked about this is kind of where your mindfulness practice comes in. This is where this thing about staying present comes in, because a lot of times when we're future oriented, we can be catastrophizing and imagining the worst, right? Yes. But if we can stay in the present and sort of deal with what is right now, and we can sort of just, again, do something kind, do something productive, do something to contribute to the solution, do something, like you said, to help a neighbor, do something to cultivate a relationship, do something to help somebody in need. These types of things, if we can move out of that stress response and back into that more parasympathetic. It's more like that executive functioning or the sage brain, where we can bring our best self and our best thinking to the situation.
Yeah. And would you say like breathing 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out is also another one to help with that too?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of ways. So essentially what we're talking about is shifting out of that parasympathetic fight, flight, or freeze mode, the survival brain, as it were, and into the more rest and digest, the parasympathetic. So essentially it's about regulating our nervous system. For me, I feel this when I'm more calm, cool, and collected. It's kind of like driving in my car going 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, maybe 50 miles an hour, and things are good and things are moving forward and everything's fine. When I start to everybody has to find their own way to know what their nervous system feels like. For me, when I get anxious, everything starts going really fast. My thoughts start going fast. My heart starts going fast. I also start to feel some heat in my face, in my hands, in my arms. So I begin to understand like, okay, you need to apply the brake. And so there are a lot of ways that I can begin to apply the brake. Breathing is one of the most direct ways to do that. And there's a variety of ways that you can breathe, but breathing in, holding your breath, and then breathing out slowly is a really great way to do it. Humming, singing, another great way.
I didn't know that one. That's actually good to know.
Yeah, because actually talking to a friend and looking into their eyes and sort of trying to feel kindness toward them, this is another great way to help reset. You can even throw cold water in your face. This is another way to help reset. You can take a walk in nature. This is another great way to reset. Having a healthy snack can also be another great way. So there are a variety of ways that you can approach this. Self-compassion can be another great way. Mindfulness, where you come in and you be kind to yourself and say, okay, this is happening. Time to apply the brakes. This is not uncommon for people to get stressed. And now we need to shift gears, right? And what can I do right now to shift gears?
The way you explained that last part, it reminded me of a story, an event I had. This one lady was an absolute, she is the definition of like a nagging Nelly or whatever, but it was she would always pick on me and yell at me. There's a whole like weird side thing with laws, but she randomly just came up to me holding this like a spatula and was yelling and like waving at me. And I like seeing me, like my cheeks were getting red. My brain was going fast. So right in front of her, I just went, and she's like looked at me like I was batshit crazy. And I'm like, all right, I'm good. What were you yelling at me again about? And she's just like, no, I'm good. And just walks away.
That was perfect. That was perfect. I love that. You know why I love that? I love that because every time we come together with one another, we can become like a loop, right? It's kind of an invitation. She was inviting you to get upset, to join her in her upset. But instead, you decided to invite her to join you in calm. By taking a deep breath, by chillaxing, by bringing it down, by de-escalating. And she ultimately, at the end of the day, you kind of won that toss-up. She decided to accept your invitation to calm down. And at the end, she was kind of like, oh, wow, you're right. I think I'm just going to go chill.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to go somewhere else now.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and it's amusing for me because like all my other coworkers are like, why'd you do that in front of her? I'm like, she was pissing me off. I'm not going to give her what she wants. They're like, but you looked crazy. I'm like, okay, Anne, I'm in better shape than she came at me.
Yeah, that was perfect. That was perfect. Because that's the other thing too, like not taking the bait. But we really can understand that, emotions are contagious.
Oh, yeah.
So we can decide whether or not we want to, catch that anger bug, or we can decide like to sort of, give the kind bug. Right. And see if we can get them to catch the kind bug or the calm bug.
Yeah. So I'm just curious for you, to help with regulating emotions. Maybe someone's not fully there to like be crazy like Josh and breathe in front of a crazy coworker, but would you recommend maybe something like a CBD or like a calming tea? I forgot what it's called, like cachava. No, not cachava. That's the shake thing. But you get what I'm going for.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Absolutely. You could do soothing teas. For me, one of the biggest things that I like to recommend or that I find useful is empathy. So when a person is having a tough time and is kind of melting down and is really sort of showing that they're triggered, they're having a stress response, the best thing I think is just sort of what you're doing. What you did was to breathe deeply. You don't have to do it to sort of interrupt the pattern, but I thought that was great that you did that as well. But you can regulate your own breathing and you can ask yourself, I wonder what this person needs. I wonder what this person, like what triggered this person. But primarily, you're wanting to say, I wonder what they need. What do they need? So this then helps you to try and assume their position. And if you stay calm and say, so I see that you're really upset. I'm wondering what you need. Or you could ask, I'm wondering how I can help. Or I'm wondering how you imagine I can help. Right. But you can also just stand there and listen and then just say, wow, I see this really matters to you. And I see that you're really upset about it. And that could be the end of it. So the point is there are stages, right? So with empathy, you can just remember, okay, they're upset, but I don't have to get upset. And you can just stand and listen and regulate your own breathing and be curious about why they're upset. You can move to the next step, which would be to ask about it or to just reflect that you see they're upset and that you understand that this is important to them. Then you could move to the next step, which would be, what do you need? Right? To ask them, so that then this starts to ground them and they start to think about, well, I need somebody to help me, or I need somebody to be kind to me, or I need somebody to respect me, or I need somebody to understand me, right? So they might begin to say what it is they need. And then you could move to the next step and say, well, how can I help you? Can I help you? Or how can you do that? How can you begin to do that or move towards that? So empathy is a really great strategy.
It really is. And it's like tying back to the management system earlier, it seems like they forget we're humans and they're just whatever. It's like it's all interconnected. But the one for me, so I got COVID back in 2020 in December, and it was one of the earlier variants. So it was the kind that really would kill me really quick. I'm a tough SOB to kill. So
thank goodness.
Right? We wouldn't be having this convo.
Yeah.
But one of my buddies, he got it too. And his mom, she was already on the out. And that's where I think the doctor before she got COVID said she had 6 months. So he was like, it was one of those, he already knew she was on the out. So he was trying to enjoy it. Well, he brought COVID in and just sped it up and killed her quicker. And it was just one of those, like we had our 2 weeks off to recover, but I noticed that he was gone for another extra 5 days. And that's where when I saw him in person, I think it was near my birthday near New Year's Eve. I'm like, hey, his name's Robert. He listens to these shows every so often, but I said, hey, you look off. It's not like the COVID brain fog kind of thing. Like we were all still struggling with it. And he's like, oh yeah, my mom died. I killed her. And I'm like, you can't just casually say that and expect it to work normal. I'm like, did you hold a knife above her or something? He's like, no. I gave her COVID and just, she had compromised lungs and this and this. And I'm like, okay, you're making excuses. So we literally, I just sat him down. We were working a whole shift and he chatted with me for 20 minutes. And he's like, thank you. And I'm like, sounds weird, but we got to stay in California. Can I give you a hug? And so he went about his day and he seemed better. Recently he's trying to diet because he was still eating and drinking a lot. And he was a drinker, but it was one of those maybe 1 or 2 beers a day. Nothing crazy, but he's suddenly kicking up to 4 beers and then a liter of Jack Daniels and the 4 beers. And I'm like, I stand down, I'm like, but are you sure you got over your mother? Yeah. And it was just one of those, it took him 2 weeks and he came back and sat and he's like, no, I don't think I ever processed that death correctly. I'm like, it is a very stressful thing you just went through. So he's much better now, but yeah.
Wow.
But it was just, all it took was just me sit him down and be like, buddy, just unload it kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that was such a kind and humane thing to do. He was lucky that he had you, because here again, grief is very stressful. And we really do need people to help us sometimes to grieve. And certainly in that case, that points very well to what we're talking about with mindsets. How we think about things drives our emotions. So for him to think that he killed his mother, to frame what happened, sort of the tragedy of what happened, kind of like an accident thing, just like two things coming together as something that I killed my mom. Wow, that's really intense. And that will drive a lot of grief, guilt and shame. and regret and remorse. And really all of those emotions, those negative emotions, are extremely stressful. Human beings are really not meant to feel those negative emotions. We're meant to have them like a trigger to alert us to the fact that something is up, but then they should be quick, and we should get back to feeling the positive emotions that, like love and passion and kindness and joy and awe and I'm trying to think of some of the others, serene and calm, and love is a big one. Joy, I'm trying to think. What can I think? Anyway,
I was like, you hit all the positive spectrums on that one.
Yeah, we need to get back to that sense of, I loved my mother so much and I miss her and I'm grateful. Gratitude is a huge one for all the time that I had with her and all the things that she taught me.
Oh, and that's kind of what, during that 20-minute sit down with him, I just told him, like, no, dude, like, because that's where he told me about the 6 months. I'm like, she was already on the out. And it was like during that chat, he's like, like one of her last words she said to me, she's like, you're not at fault. And he's like, I didn't understand what she meant. I'm like, because she knows you. She's your mother. She knows you're going to blame yourself for this. And he's like, oh, all right, man.
Yeah. So he was really able to hear his mom's voice instead of that other voice in his head. Yeah. How we make sense of these things, our interpretation is huge. And this is a lot like what I was talking about when we started the conversation. So what was the biggest overhaul that I had to make in my life? Sure, I had to clean up my diet, but the biggest overhaul I had to make was how I was thinking about things.
So would that be the mindset, but also spirituality of everything too?
Yes, to a certain extent. It is about purpose. Who am I? My narrative. Where am I coming from? Where am I going? What's the point of my existence? Yeah, this is a lot of that spirituality piece. But the biggest thing is how we make sense of ourselves and what happens in the world.
So then I'm just asking more as for a person, wow, words really stuck for me too today. How would you help someone, maybe they don't have a firm grip on their purpose or spirituality? I know it's not your specialty, but it's like, how would you help a fellow human find that?
Oh, absolutely. As part of my stress management, we're always looking for purpose. That's one of the very first things we do. There are assessments, we surface their values, we surface their strengths. Right away, we get very clear about what it is that lights them up. And then we start to think about how they're using those things to achieve success in the world. And then when we start like thinking about how to bring them to the things, the challenges, right? So again, it's about trying to bring the clarity and then connect the dots between our successes and how we can use those things to actually also help us with our challenges.
It's interesting. So then basic process. So you said their strengths, their likes and all that. I'll just give myself an example. I'm very analytical. I can understand data. You can give me a lot very quickly and I can process it, find an answer, and I'm good at finding patterns. But for the longest time, I couldn't figure out, well, okay, I can look at a lot of data and I can find the pattern, but how do I help people or make a living off it kind of thing? I've figured it out better, but let's say someone similar that has no clue. How would you help them out?
Well, that is sort of like, again, there I probably would help them to do some of that career counseling where you're really trying to connect your strengths with jobs that exist. And how can you begin to qualify yourself for a position in which that requires a lot of what your strength is? Typically, I'm not working with people that are trying to do career transition or trying to change their jobs. Typically, I'm working with people who are where they want to be, and they're just trying to manage the stress better, or they just got into a new position, and now they're trying to figure out how to adapt to the new leadership role. They're in transition.
Okay. So it's the transitionary. I'm asking more the stationary. Okay. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. No, this is perfect to make these distinctions. The other thing, like for me, like one of the biggest ways we could talk about mindset, you've probably heard of this, but the growth versus the fixed mindset. Have you heard of this? Yeah.
Really explain it anyways, please.
So a lot of times people, like for me, for instance, I was struggling. I was operating from a fixed mindset and I did not know it. And then when I learned about a growth mindset, I said like, oh, wow. Yeah. Big difference. And when I started to adopt more of a growth mindset, I started to feel a lot better. So in a fixed mindset, we pretty much expect that it should be easy to do things, and that if it's not easy, then it means we're not good at it and we should leave it. It also means that we tend to protect ourselves from making mistakes because we're always sort of managing the way, looking good. And always having the answers and always being on top of everything. Whereas with a growth mindset, people are more interested in trying new things and learning new things and recognize that mistakes are part of the process, part of the growth, the development process. And so they're better able to cope with those things. And they don't let, for instance, things like you mentioned, like being shy, stop them from trying things. If they want something, they know that they can go ahead and try to get it or more of it, right? To cultivate new skills.
Oh yeah. Like for example, like the show, I want to start at a podcast back in 2017. But that's when like Joe Rogan was on Twitter and everyone's trying to cancel him. And I'm sitting there, fixed mindset. I'm like, oh, well, I still need to work a normal job. Like I don't want to get in trouble and lose all ability for income. Now I'm sitting here going, let him do it. I don't care. Kind of thing. But yeah, that was the hardest point for me, because it's like I was fixed on, you still have to work. Even if you run a show, you still have to work for someone. You still have to have a good reputation, kind of thing.
Yeah. So fixed in that way is slightly different than what I'm talking about, but I love it. It's perfect because that's exactly when we get stuck on something, that an idea, right, that doesn't serve us anymore, that we need to let go of and that we need to update. And this is a slightly different because, again, it's just an old belief that doesn't work, an old understanding of the world that we got a long time ago. So for instance, a great example of that is kind of what you're saying, that you have to do the traditional thing and then have the side hustle. You can't make the side hustle your traditional thing, right? Your centerpiece, your mainstay. For us, we talked about, I have to always put others first and never take care of myself. So that's no, that belief needs to be revised to say it's both and. It's not either or, it's both. And it's okay for me to incorporate myself into the picture and my needs, and then try and work to find compromises for me and for the other person.
Oh, 100%. Well, the only reason I brought that up is that was the pivot point for me. Then December of 2020. But as I've been reading a lot of books, that's where when I heard growth, I'm like, like reading. But I guess my interpretation of growth was wrong.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant that's perfect, your growth. I just meant that when they talk about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So that's that. And then another thing is really just when people get stuck on certain ideas and they need to outgrow those ideas, or they need to update those understandings of the world, if that makes sense. And they need to adopt a new understanding. So this is kind of about your whole model of the world, your whole understanding of everything, right? So sometimes, let's see, how can I say this? It's kind of like what we talked about before, that you have a mind and that you've constructed your mind, which is a lot like your knowledge. It's kind of like the difference between the map and the territory. Like the territory is one thing, one reality, and then the map of the territory, which you've constructed over time, which is basically a reflection of your understanding of the territory, may or may not be accurate. That makes sense.
Okay.
So you're always looking for, whoops, in reality, that road goes left, but my road says it goes right. So that would be what I meant about fixations, where we kind of have bugs in the software, errors, and they have to be fixed. They have to be ironed out. They have to be updated, revised.
So I'm now just asking a hypothetical. Immediately, I thought of a coworker, and we always tease him because he lives in early 2000 in the 90s. So he's like, oh, this happened recently. Like, how recent are we talking? 10 or 20 years ago, recent kind of thing. But that's he's very fixed. He only wants to live in the 90s. And I'm like, dude, we're 2022. You're really far behind now.
Exactly. And basically, when we think about, mental health, and we think about things that give people fits, right, that constantly trip them up, there are basically two things. One is avoiding things. Like, right. We know there are things that we should cope with, but we just keep avoiding it, going around it, going over, under, around, like whatever, right? This is another great thing that coach can help you with. If there's something that you need to deal with, but you're avoiding it, get a coach. They'll help you to start to, pick that apart, see what's stopping you, help you start to make plans and help you start to move toward it, encourage you and support you and, problem solve and troubleshoot and all that kind of thing. The other thing that can get you in trouble is this kind of fixed, I don't mean a fixed mindset in the sense of growth versus fixed, but I mean this fixation,
right?
Where it's kind of like you're addicted or adhered to something and you're kind of like stuck on that and there's no flexibility. There's no choice. Does that make sense?
No, and that's both of those hit him easy. And it's yeah, that's the one thing, because he's very negative by nature. And it's one of those I it's kind of like the lady I told about earlier. Every time I'm around, he tries not to be negative around me because he's like, I feel like it's a bad thing. And I was like, I just try to be as happy and just happy-go-lucky. And you're just all like, the coffee is bitter. Kind of thing.
Yes. I think that this is, I love that you're bringing this up right now, just to be able to talk a little bit about positive psychology and the happiness advantage. Now, in some ways, this feels to me a little like glass half empty, glass half full. And the truth of the matter is people who are more optimistic and experience more positive emotions do have better health outcomes, period. End of story. And certainly when we talk about stress management, that is one of the first things that I help clients to do. I help clients to get back into feeling, when you talk about emotion regulation, back into intentionally feeling positive emotions, because there is this thing called the negativity bias, and we can very easily slip into it, where we find ourselves being angry or annoyed or irritated or anxious or fearful or worrying, basically all the time. And this is not good. This is not associated with good health outcomes. So you definitely want to take this in hand and change it.
Oh, 100%. That was me like 3 years ago. A butterfly flew by. I'm like, oh God, the apocalypse is coming, kind of thing.
Catastrophizing. The fancy word for that is catastrophizing. Like you just imagine the worst about everything.
Yeah. And I noticed from even back then, like my blood pressure was borderline. I could have a heart attack at any moment. And I was on some heavy prescription meds back then too. So that was not helping. And yeah, but now I try to approach things as more just like how I jokingly tell people so they can process. I try to be Buddha, but I don't want to give up like everything materialistic.
Yeah. Well, Buddha, for me, the biggest thing about Buddha is just like non-attachment to outcomes. I'm doing things because they make me happy and because they're fun and because they're interesting. Again, back to those, actually scholars have worked this out, and there are actually 10 emotions associated with flourishing. So the point is you really do want to try and have these 10 emotions going in your life. So what do you find really curious, really interesting? Pursue the things that you find fascinating. What inspires you? Get involved in the things that inspire you. What fills you with awe and amazement and wonder? Spend time contemplating those things. What fills you with love? Love. What do you love? Spend time with the things that you love. What are you grateful for? Make sure that you spend lots of time thinking about all the things that you're so grateful for. Then also joy. What makes you joyful? What makes you laugh? What makes you laugh? What do you find humorous? What do you find funny? Spend time laughing. I mean, you can even just go and do laughter yoga where you're not even laughing at anything. You're just laughing. But the point is spend time each day feeling laughing, finding things that are amusing. Also then serene. Feeling serene, intentionally try to get into that state of serenity and calm. And there are things, so a lot of what I do with clients is try to shift that negativity bias. Typically, we understand the other thing. Scholars have sorted this out. Because negative things weigh so much more than positive things, you usually need 3 positive to every 1 negative just to strike a balance. Not to tip the scale in favor of positivity, but just to strike a balance.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've heard that before. But it's one of those, And then my next question was going to be that, because like, what if someone who grew up in a bit of a negative feedback loop environment, where I'll just give myself as an example. I grew up in a school district. I was like the only white kid in Hispanic campus, so I was attacked for everything. No one believed me. Then I went to junior high, which honestly everyone says high school is the worst. I'm like, junior high, they are ruthless. And I was bullied for having really crooked. I had way more crooked teeth. It looked more animalistic, like a beast. My teeth grew in quicker than I anticipated. So they're like, oh, snaggle tooth. And like this one lady, it was like kind of like the junior high crush. I really liked her, but I didn't want to be the weird one to say it. And then she pretty much came up to me, so like dead to my face, kind of like, I thought she was flirting, and says, no woman will ever actually love you. And it was just kind of one of those, I was like, and recently, as I've been like fixing myself, I'm like, man, I really believe the whole, you're a monster, you're unlovable kind of thing. So how would you help someone with that get out of those trenches then, I guess?
Oh, my heart goes out to you. This is unfortunately, when we're little like this, we really can't see ourselves. And so we really do absorb what the community, because the community really is the mirror that does tell us who we are. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, when the community is skewed like that was like seriously skewed, like a house of mirrors you were in, and the reflection that they were giving was not an accurate reflection of who you were, representation of who you were. But unfortunately, when you're trying to create your self-concept, again, that's back to the map and the territory, right? The map and the territory. Later, we could know that the territory was that you're this so many things, right? So many things, not just perhaps awkward, or not just perhaps white, but many other things like kind, smart, analytical, capable of growth, right? Like, so potential, raw potential, positivity, kindness, again, clearly attractive now, so that you could grow up and become a man and look different and grow out of teenagers, we're all kind of gangly when we're teens sometimes, right?
We really are.
Yeah, we could grow out of it. So there was so much more to the territory, but unfortunately, they were only showing you very small slice of that territory. And we do this. We take on that as the whole, when it's really just a sliver of the reality of what's there, the potential, right?
Right.
So when we get stuck with that negative identity, it is a real challenge to grow out of that. That's kind of that whole thing. But it's the same thing like any of these mindsets. We have to take our self-concept as a mindset and begin to surface what we believe about ourselves and begin to question, challenge, and revise, and then take on new truths about ourselves and then hold those and act from those new truths.
It's very true. Yeah, I'm still recovering from all that, but I've gotten to that point where I'm like, oh yeah, I happened back then. You were just young and dumb, you didn't know better, kind of thing.
Well, you weren't dumb, but
I still talk about myself negative.
You were just a human being. You were just like naive in that way that we all are. And then unfortunately, what happened with so we're always looking at the environment that the person is embedded in. So you're like a plant growing in a particular environment. So you came sort of to reflect the things from that environment. If you had been growing in a different environment, you would have reflected different things. So a lot of this is just the chance of where we kind of show up in the world, where we happen to come into being, and what are the forces. This is what I loved about my PhD in human development and family studies, is really trying to understand all the forces that shaped my becoming and recognize that, no, I just didn't come out like this. There were forces that shaped me, that I am basically the sum total of those 5 people in my world, right? So in this case, your peers, your neighborhood, this girl, like these significant people. So that's why we need to understand that we have to open up that model of the world and include other people who have other things to say, and recognize that what they said was controversial or incomplete or inaccurate, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what I've been doing. I use at times NLP.
Yep. Love NLP.
Perfect. I still like earlier, I catch myself. I still say negative things. There's like, oh, you're stupid kind of thing. I have to sit there like, nope, don't say that. But I'm just curious. I like time just flew by. How long do I got you for?
I think we had until noon, I think, right?
Oh, was it? Okay.
I mean, I can go a little longer if you want, but
I just want to make sure because it's like some people like a hard stop right at that time.
Yeah, I think I'm okay. Let me just check here. Yeah, I'm okay.
Cool. So then for the NLP, do you incorporate NLP with your process, or more like here's an outline, go do it, and then come back to me if you need help kind of thing?
No, sometimes I really like to incorporate NLP because I like to help people. Sometimes you can get faster results. And I also use like self-hypnosis, and I use guided meditation. So I use a variety of strategies to help people let go of things. It's both. Because you do have to go out and practice things, but sometimes you can change beliefs very quickly. And people can feel immediately sort of empowered and released, but they still have to go out and kind of do the work, as it were, to build the muscle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have to do it you have to physically do it to also have it like, how do I explain in martial arts? I have to physically do it so I can mentally remember it. And like it somehow like do it mental and ingrains on my soul. It's like, and now it's going nowhere now, but, I'm just curious. You just hypnosis. I'm the one. I guess I'm one of those people. I'm the harder person to hypnotize. I had a hypnotist come on and try to do it to me, but I told him, I said no. Like I like that subliminal stuff. Like, and he mentioned something. This is where I'm trying to tie it into that. He said, "What music do you listen to?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, music." Doesn't matter who you are. If you enjoy it, you're hypnotized. And I'm like, jokingly, so music is magic. I got it now. Okay.
Well, here again, it depends on what so trance is really just about trying to access other parts of ourselves. And certainly when we listen to music, we can be carried away and feel like connect with different parts of ourselves, different memories, different possibilities. So the point is we can feel sort of held. And I would argue that everything we're talking about, like our mindsets are a form, we have been hypnotized and we are in trance in relation to those things. And sometimes what we're trying to do is wake up from that. We're trying to wake up. We're trying to snap out of it. We're trying to come back to reality, back to our senses, and come away from that trance that we've been sort of hypnotized into or fallen into, lulled into.
Oh, 100%. And that's kind of what he alluded to is because I told him, I said, well, I don't like listen to a lot of music, but if I do, it's a really aggressive band called Slipknot and Disturbed. They're very angry. And he's like, you're just feeding more anger to the problem. You're putting gas on a gasoline fire. And I'm like, so my 2 and 2, so I should just cut all music off. And actually that was the great thing for me because I even noticed, now this is just me, don't go cold turkey like Josh kids. Even if I listened to like Mozart, yes, it was great and I got tranquil and I was happy, but I noticed I would enter an emotional state, even though I'm happy, and how my brain works. Like, well, if I'm emotional, we're just going to go everywhere. So I've just been listening to podcasts and books lately, and I've noticed I'm so much more grounded. But that's the tying back to the hypnotizing with the music. Do you often recommend people like young me listening to aggressive music, like maybe you should incorporate this kind of thing?
Well, I think again, it depends on what we're working on, right?
Right.
So,
each case is unique.
Yes, exactly. And the nice thing to know is that, the one thing I like about NLP is they're not really saying that there's anything that's particularly bad. They're just saying that some things are more useful, right? So it's about the fitness of what you're doing to the situation and whether or not it's working. So it's more about that. So for instance, we could say, well, there's something wrong with anger, especially if you have a person who's really frightened or really timid. Like maybe anger is a way for them to contact some energy or strength in their body or some kind, because if you think about anger, it's really just, you're very energized and very directed, Right. So for some people who's really angry, no, we probably don't want to make them angry or feed them more angry making stuff. But sometimes if we have somebody who's a little too docile or a little too passive, maybe we want to get them to feel a little angry. It's kind of like making a cake or a cocktail. What we need, like, it's a mixed thing. It's a mixed drink. It's not straight. Again, getting back to that thing, like we said before, we don't want the Johnny one note. We want to have all the colors. We want access to all our humanity because we never know when we're going to need it. We don't want to be stuck. It's kind of with your martial arts. You really want to be just there, ready, not overcommitted.
Right.
That's really what it is. It's trying to find that place where you're ready, but not overcommitted. Right. And a lot of people, when they come, especially into coaching or therapy, they're overcommitted. So they're stuck. Like if anything's coming at them, they can't respond because they're overcommitted and they're already out of it.
Yeah.
Right. So we try to get people back to that neutral place where they're not committed yet and they're waiting to see what comes and then they can respond appropriately.
Oh, and that's what I learned from martial arts, like you said. But the biggest one for me is back to like the empathy. It's just know what's going on and just kind of like the stereotypical stories, like, whoa, man, like all the trees are happy, I'm happy kind of thing, without having to take the stuff to get there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's a big thing, just to see yourself as a part of like an ecosystem, which is quite miraculous. Like, again, to sit and ponder that'll put you in a state of awe.
Right. Seriously. Yeah. But I do have a question on the psychedelics. I'm certain, I'm just assuming at this point, that you don't advocate for psychedelics, but do you see a use case for them for helping with people with deep-rooted traumas? If I put you on the podium, we can just go on to the next one.
I love that you said suddenly, speaking of psychedelics, it was like, where did that come from? I guess in your head, someone spoke of psychedelics.
I did. Good old ADHD. Sorry about that.
No, well, for me, as an integrative wellness coach, I am that is sort of alternative methods that can help. So no, I am not anti anything. Okay. And I love the work that they're doing to try and explore how some of these substances can help people to break through, like what we talked about with you, that hard shell of a self-concept or that hard shell of a mindset, and see again if they can find a way to access other parts of themselves that can begin to sort of bring them back to life, back to that softness, back to that, back to the growth mindset. Back to that sense of being more at ease in their skin and in the world and taking on the challenges that is the human condition, that is life, that is living.
Yeah.
So no, I'm a scientist. So I love exploration. I love science. I love what they're doing. If it can help people, that's great. I don't participate obviously off label or illegally or whatever, because I'm too scared. I'm afraid that I'm going to, there are a lot of people who get their minds blown, but then they can't put them back together. So this is why I like the therapy assisted. And there really are therapists apparently who do make their whole life like helping people put their minds back together after they have a bad trip or whatever. Oh, so for me, I'm just a little too cautious.
Yeah. I had an ex-girlfriend and we would smoke a lot of weed, but this is when I was still on prescription meds. And so it was this, I was unemployed for 6 months before I got my current job. So I went up to Idaho to help my aunt move, and I came back and I started taking my prescription meds because they ran out. Well, the reason I came back was to go to a Bad Company concert. And the lady that got us in, we just had to pay for a ticket. She got us in free working for the fair. She made her own edibles and she grew her own plant. She extracted it and made it. And it was one of those, I'm like, oh, I've done it before. I kind of know like the feel kind of thing. Well, my first problem, I drank a beer on an empty stomach. And so that it was like a really high, like a wine glass essentially of alcohol. And so I'm already loose from that. And she's like, oh, here's a whole cookie. She didn't tell us. It was like 800 to 1,000 milligrams of THC.
Wow.
And I had a hell of a trip.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where, when you said like, there's a whole people who make a career from them, I'm like, yeah, if I didn't know what the hell I was doing, my mind could have split so hard. I don't know. I would just been like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was a real, came back to, that was a real eye opener. It was like the whole ecosystem, concept. And, well, it was essentially like I was in a white box above the Milky Way looking down. And I'm just sitting here going like, wow, like in the scale of things, everything that's going on is minuscule.
Yep. In the grand scheme of things, talk about putting things in perspective. Yeah. And that's usually what people do. A lot of times what people do discover from these, I hear from these kinds of experiences, really helps you to put things in perspective. That's kind of what we're saying. It helps you tap into another place in the picture.
It does. And then to tie on to the spirituality of it, because I took almost a gram of THC, which is just unheard of. That's definitely not good for the liver, but it was so I, growing up, like I said, the school, neighborhood and all that, but I also had trouble with the church. People would always make fun of me for being overweight. So like no place was actually safe for me. And that's where essentially was a female pastor, nothing wrong with that. But it was just like, she came up to me like, Josh, you're fat. God doesn't like fat people. You're going to hell. You might want to lose some weight. And I was just kind of one of those, well, if that's your God, I don't want him then kind of thing. And that was kind of like my whole stance throughout the whole church. Well, when I got to that white box above the Milky Way, I heard this sweetest voice. The only way to describe it is like a man that would hand you a cup of, well, man or woman, it doesn't really matter. Man or woman that would hand you a cup of coffee and a blanket and expect nothing in return. It was the softest, kindest voice I've ever heard. And pretty much said, you're not supposed to be here. Why are you here? You have too much to do.
Wow. Cool.
And that's where, like, when I snapped back to reality, I was like, okay, if that's God, I'll get behind that one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there was some part, for me, I don't know if you're really like, tuning into the universe, then, picking up waves that are there. I don't know. Or if you just found a part of yourself that was there, the kind of manifestation of God or kindness or divine, right? That you wanted to reflect in the world. And basically, in a way, that's what you're doing. You're kind of saying, hey, have a cup of coffee, take a blanket, sit down, take a load off, let's chat a little.
Right.
And so you're sort of being that kind of, being that essence, like you tapped into your essence, the kind of guy you want to be. And this is huge. Again, we're back to that purpose. Like this is essentially who I want to be in the world for people.
Right. How I explain it to people is like, everyone says the cliche, oh, I want to leave the world a little better than I found it. Well, define how you found it, because you were young. And how I say to people is like, if I can make a significant difference, even in one person's life, my mission's complete. Like I can check out and leave anytime and I'll be fine. So that's my new thing, is like, I want to at least significantly impact one person's life. And then my life, I've succeeded in what I believe I needed to do.
Well, it sounds like you've already done that with your buddy who did that with his mom, who had that notion about his mom, killing his mom. I mean, I think right there, you did it. Like, I don't know how you're going to define that, but you've probably done it many times. Actually.
And I just don't even realize it.
Yep.
This has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to chat with you. I don't want to hold you up too long. I got 3 questions for you going out.
Okay.
So other than work, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy during these COVID times? Well, former COVID times.
Other than work. Well, it's hard to say other than work, but essentially like I have been like working on all these changes and improvements. I've been trying to grow my business, which is huge, trying to get the word out that I'm here and that I can help people and that I really want to help people. And so, other than like the normal things people are doing, catching up on some cool Netflix shows, hanging out with my dog, chilling, but basically just trying to improve my life and, move towards my future goals.
Wonderful. Someone that's inspired by you, wants to walk down a similar path, what are some tips, tricks, or advice you give them to start that?
If somebody wanted to walk in my shoes, I would definitely encourage them to get, for me, this is me, right? I love school, and I would encourage them to get a liberal arts education, because for me, this completely transformed my world. I was in such, I've had it pre and post, and I love my life post liberal arts education. And so I'm a big fan. I know it can be really stressful when you're going through it, but the way that it expands your world and helps you to understand so much more about what's going on, I think is extremely beneficial.
Wonderful. And then where can everyone contact you at? They're now like, all right, Josh, we need a contactor.
Well, they can contact me through my website, BoschIntegrativewellness.com. And so we spell my name like the appliances, BOSCH, integrativewellness.com. And I do have a freebie that they can download there that is Conquer Overwhelm, and they can get that right on my homepage.
Perfect. And I'll have a link and everything in the description. Thank you so much again. I've learned a lot, for me at least. So this has been very informative and great.
Well, I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to meet you. I'm just thrilled that you're working your plan and that you're sharing your essence. I love that. Thinking of you as the guy who says, hey, a cup of coffee and a blanket and a chat. I love that. I feel that sort of warmth from you and easygoing. And so I appreciate the opportunity to, and let's get real and let's be kind. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations. You made it to the end. You're an awesome person. Not many make it here. So, being the awesome person that you are, can you do me one more awesome favor? Can you rate and review this on whatever podcast services you're using? If you do it on Apple and you leave an actual written review, I have a thing on my website. I will take your written review and post it for all to see. Congratulations, you're permanently sealed on my site. Otherwise, I am trying to do YouTube more and live streaming. I will try to put as many of the YouTube links in the description of the show as I can. So give your boy some extra help over on YouTube. Watch my videos. I just mute it and change the channel, change the window or something. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being awesome, and see you next time.